Good morning, everybody. So today it's chapter 11 of The Clockwork Crow, and the chapter is called Down the Golden Stair. So I wonder if that means that Seren's going to be going down today. We'll see. Okay. The clock is grey with dust in the land where time is lost. For a night and a day the snow fell. The house grew colder. Ice formed on the windows, and small birds came to the sills and pecked at the crumbs Denzil threw out for them. Snow banked up high against the doors, the branches of the trees became laden with it, and only tiny berries of holly were bright in a white world. Wrapped in a shawl, Seren sat watching from the window of her room. There was no way they could send her back. No one could even get outside until late in the day, when the blizzard finally stopped, and she heard the scrape of a shovel and knew Gwyn or Denzil were out there somewhere, clearing a path. The Crow spent the time huddled up by the small fire Mrs. Villiers had allowed her to light. It was a picture of misery.
"Oh, I've never been so cold," it shivered.
"At least the thin man can't get at you," Seren said with satisfaction. The snow globe stood on her table, green and glinting. She dared not shake it again. Finally, as darkness fell and the light from the lamp in the window sent a faint glimmer across the blue shadows of the snow, Denzil brought her up a tray of supper. "We've cleared a path," he said. She knew what that meant. Tomorrow the carriage horses would be saddled and she would be driven to the station, but she just smiled at him. He went away, shaking his head. She tried not to worry, because at midnight tonight the bell would ring. It had to, as it had for Thomas. It was hard to settle. She wandered aimlessly around the room until the Crow muttered,
"Oh, you're making my head ache. Sit still."
Instead, she put on her oldest dress, stuffed some of the bread and cheese from the supper tray in her pocket, and wrapped her shawl around her. When the clock struck 10, she took some paper and a pencil from the bedside table and wrote, "Dear Mrs. Villiers, I have gone to find Thomas. Please don't worry. I will be back as soon as I can. Yours sincerely, Seren." She put it in an envelope, wrote Mrs. Villiers on it and propped it up on her pillow. She climbed onto the bed and lay back. "Now," she said, "we wait. You keep watch." The Crow snorted. The bell woke her. Instantly she jumped up. It rang with such a sharp, silvery urgency, she thought everyone in the house must have heard it. But if they had, no one stirred. The room was bitterly cold and the world outside a whirling spiral of snowfall. The Crow was asleep and snoring. She slid out and shook it, and as soon as it opened its beak, she grabbed it shut. "Shh! The bell rang! I'm going down there." She took a breath. "You're not scared, are you?" Carefully she took her hand away. The Crow wrinkled its beak and spat out imaginary fluff and looked at her in disdain.
"Oh, I'm a prince. I don't get scared."
Seren grinned. "Come on then." She grabbed her coat, struggled into it, and pushed Thomas's diary into one pocket. After a second's thought, she pushed the snow globe into the other. Then she slipped out. The Crow flew after her, a swooping shadow. They hurried downstairs. All the house was strange. Snow glimmer lit ceilings and odd corners with a reflected whiteness. The clocks seemed to tick louder, and the eyes in the portraits on the walls watched them pass beneath. She felt as if the books and the furniture and the mirrors all were alive and interested. Doors opened easily and no floorboards creaked. It was as if the house wanted her to flit silently through its secrets, as if it wanted her to find Thomas. She tiptoed past the kitchens. The fire had burned down, the ashes settled. She could still smell the faint remnants of Denzil's tobacco. The cat, asleep on a stool, lifted its head and watched her pass, but it didn't get up. She came to the top of the cellar stairs and began to creep down them. They were cold and damp, and her breath made great clouds here. It was slippery too, and scary, but she thought of Thomas pattering down here in his slippers, and that gave her some courage, because only she could find him now. And when he came back, how Lady Mare would cry out with joy. At the bottom of the steps, she lifted her candle high and looked around. she saw a glow, a golden shimmering glow. It was coming from the adjoining cellar. "See that?" she whispered. The crow said,
Yes, very strange.
It flitted through the arch. Seren followed. The cellar was small and vaulted, and the light was so bright she didn't need a candle. She placed it on the floor in its holder. The air quivered, as if the echo of the bell still hung. And there, before her, were the golden stairs. They seemed misty, almost shimmering, but they were real enough, and they ran through the wall and down into the floor. If she stared hard, she could still see the bricks and the stone slabs through them, but they were insubstantial now, faded to nothing. She came to the top step and looked down. The stairs twisted into a golden haze, so she couldn't see where they went. "What do you think?" The crow perched on the rail and tipped its dark head.
Well, I think you're scared.
Seren nodded. She licked dry lips. "Yes, I'm scared," she said, "but I'm not going to let that stop me." Then she began to walk down. It was so strange. The steps weren't there, and yet they were. The light was golden and it was all around her, but it wasn't warm. In fact, the further down she went, the colder her heart and her fingers were. "Are you here?" she whispered.
Right by you. In fact,
she felt the crow's awkward weight land on her shoulder. "That's better," she said. Did the stairs twist left or right? She couldn't tell. But gradually, as she spiralled down them, the golden glow faded and became more of a flickering light, and the air grew colder and colder, until she could see rock walls, glistening wet with seams of coal and quartz. "It's a cave." "Shh!" The crow's warning was right in her ear.
listen.
Music. It was far, far away, but she could hear it. It was so sweet, it made her want to both cry and laugh at the same time. She jammed her hands over her ears. "I can't stop hearing it."
Take this,
the crow said hastily. It plucked one feather from its tail and held it out. She took it. "Oh," she said, hugely disappointed, because now the music was gone.
Keep the feather on you and you won't hear it.
"I want to hear it."
Yes, of course you do, stupid. That's how they get you.
The crow sniffed and watched her tuck the feather in her belt.
So, which way now?
They had reached the bottom of the stairs. The tunnel divided into three in front of them. The right-hand one had golden walls of stone, the centre silver walls of ice, the left-hand one bronze walls of metal. Seren frowned. "How am I supposed to know?"
Well, I don't suppose it matters.
The crow peered into the tunnels curiously.
Wherever they want you to go, they'll lead you.
"Left, then." In the stories, it was always the third one that was right, never the gold or silver. Her heart thudding, Seren stepped into the bronze tunnel. It ran straight ahead. Her footsteps made a weird metallic clatter echoing all around. She felt like that girl in the book, Alice, deep under the ground where everything was strange, especially when they came to the well. It lay in her path, a round hole, all blackness. A ladder made of bronze rungs led down it, and the tunnel ended beyond in a silver wall. "You go down first and see what's there," she whispered.
What? No chance,
The crow snapped. It perched on the ladder top and gazed down.
Looks deep.
Seren shrugged. She knotted up her skirt, swung herself over the edge, and began to descend the ladder. She went down and down and down until there was nothing but darkness, and her hands were sore, and her breath was gone, and her own weight dragged at her. She stopped, clutching tight, her breathing huge in the well. "It's getting smaller. The walls are closing in," the crow said.
Stay there.
It flew down past her and was gone, deep into the dark. Seren waited, but it didn't come back. She couldn't stay here, hanging on, so she carried on down, and after a while the crow swooped up.
Not much further,
it whispered.
and then you'll get a big surprise.
Seren nodded. She was so cold she couldn't speak. But at that moment her foot touched something soft. She had reached the floor. To her astonishment, it was carpeted with green grass, so rich and thick her feet sank into it. Small white flowers grew everywhere, their sweet smell overpowering. Seren stared around. She was standing in a meadow that stretched as far as she could see. The sky was blue, but there was no sun or moon, just a pale light that cast no shadows and never seemed to change. Seren blew hair from her eyes and untied her skirt. Maybe I should have taken one of the other tunnels. Where now? The crow landed and looked closely at the flowers.
This is so strange. No insects, no butterflies. The petals of these flowers look like crystal.
Well, that's not much help. She set off walking. The crow hopped behind.
And I can smell something.
I can't. What is it? The crow stopped, considering. Then it said,
Danger.
The walk through the meadow might have taken hours or days, but there was no time here. Seren didn't even get tired. After a while she realised the meadow was gone, and she was walking through a wood. When had that happened? It was like being in a dream, but the wood was scary. The trees were all black, and their trunks contorted and tangled. And the further she went, the more tangled they got, and it was like they were laughing at her. At first she thought nothing else lived down here. Then she saw a fox. It sat under a tree and looked at her, its yellow eyes sly and alert. Quickly it slid away into the trees.
Oh dear, I think they've spotted us,
the crow muttered nervously. A little later there was an owl high in the branches. Seren stopped and the owl stared down. It didn't fly away. I only want to find Thomas, she said to it quietly, and to take him home. That's all. The owl blinked. Seren gasped, because it had become just an owl-shaped hole in the tree.
No use talking to them.
The crow was looking over her shoulder.
They don't take any notice. Anyway, look here.
Seren turned, and at once a great cry broke from her. Beyond the wood, high on a hill of snow, there rose a palace. It was like all the palaces she had read about in fairy tales, diamond white and shining. It had thin towers and turrets, high walls, gleaming roofs of silver. Every pinnacle was decorated with a flag, and each flag showed a different bird. Owls, eagles, ravens.
But no crows, the crow said in disgust. Snobs.
Annoyed, it flew straight towards the palace, and then, suddenly, with a great smack, it bounced back and fell into the dark grass. Seren raced towards it. Are you all right? The crow was dazed. It lay on its back. For a moment it stared, its eyes blank. Then it blinked twice and sat up. Its beak was even more dented than before, and it looked furious.
I should have known.
What?
Can't you feel it? Just reach out. Feel it. I could have broken my neck.
Seren did, putting her hand out cautiously into thin air. She touched something hard and smooth and invisible, and as she felt along it she found that it rose up and out as far as she could reach in any direction. A great wall of invisible glass. She stretched up on tiptoe, but there was no end to the glass.
The palace is covered with a great dome, the crow snapped, and there's no way through.
Inside the glass it was snowing. Stars sparkled in the sky. One window high in the palace had a light inside it. Maybe Thomas was up there, a prisoner. But how could they reach him? Seren put her palms flat against the glass and her nose against it and stared in. It's an enormous snow globe, she whispered. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 11. So chapter 12 tomorrow is called The Palace of Ice. So I wonder if you can make a prediction about what you think might happen. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day and I'll read you the next chapter tomorrow. Bye!